The real monsters don't have claws or fangs. They arrive with flowers, promises of eternal love, and gold rings. They build a life with you, father your children, and then, when they're firmly installed in your heart, they begin to devour your soul piece by piece. And the worst part? No one hears your screams because the neighbors only see the perfect family you pretend to be. My name is Josephine Marie Connors, but everyone knows me as Josie. I'm 85 years old, and I've carried a secret for more than half a century that corroded my soul like rust on old iron. I was born and raised in Millfield, a small town in rural Pennsylvania, where the mornings are cold and the nights guard the secrets of traditional families more zealously than the deeds to their properties. Many people around here know me only as the kind old lady who sells homemade cookies at the Sunday farmer's market, always wearing a floral dress and a scarf covering my white hair. Few imagine what I've carried in my heart since I was 23 years old. Telling this story moves me deeply, so I want to ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It gives me strength to continue and makes me feel that my story can help others. And please tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's listening to me. I feel it's long past time to tell my story, not for myself, as I've learned to carry this burden, but for all the women who, like me, face hell inside their homes and stay silent out of fear, shame, or to protect their children. Perhaps by hearing my account, someone will find the courage I took so long to find. My life began simply, like any girl's in rural Pennsylvania in the 1940s. My father, Anthony, worked in the cornfields, waking at the first rooster crow and returning only when stars dotted the sky. My mother, Sarah, took care of the house, the 5 children, and still found time to make quilts to sell at the market. I was the middle child, with 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. Our house was small, with wooden floors and a roof that let in strips of sunlight through the cracks during the day. We didn't have much, but we never lacked food or respect for each other. My father, even tired from work, always had a smile for us and never raised a hand to my mother, a rarity in those times when husbands were almost owners of their wives. "Girl, study so you don't have to depend on any man," my mother always said while teaching me quilting stitches. And I studied. I was the only one of the 5 children who completed elementary school in our community school. The teacher, Miss Eleanor, saw something in me and convinced my parents to let me continue my studies. "This girl has light in her eyes, Anthony. It would be a sin to waste it." With great sacrifice, I managed to become a teacher at 19. It was 1957, and for a farmer's daughter from the countryside, becoming a teacher was almost a miracle. I remember the pride in my father's eyes when I taught my first class at the same school where I had studied years before. "I see your mother in you, but with a book in your hand instead of a needle," he said, his voice breaking. For 3 years, I taught the children of the town, earning a modest salary that helped at home. Girls my age were already married, many with 1 or 2 children, while I remained single, dedicated to my students. The town gossips were unforgiving. "She'll end up an old maid. Too much education scares away husbands," the old ladies would say in their gossip circles. I pretended not to care, but deep down, I confess that sometimes I felt lonely. It was at a 4th of July celebration in 1960 that I met Charles. He had come from Philadelphia to work as an accountant at the only bank that had opened in town. He was tall, fair-skinned, with hair slicked back with brile cream, and a way of speaking that showed he had studied at a good school. When he asked me to dance, I felt my heart race like never before. "Would you honor me with this dance, miss?" he asked, with an elegance no local boy would ever have. I accepted, feeling my face burn with embarrassment and excitement. We danced 3 songs in a row, and then he took me to get a glass of lemonade at the stand in the square. "I've never seen such a beautiful teacher in my entire life," he said, looking into my eyes in a way that left me breathless. "You're trying to embarrass me, Mr. Charles," I replied, lowering my eyes to the lemonade glass. That night was the beginning of a courtship that turned the town upside down. An educated man from the city interested in Anthony the farmer's daughter. The same old ladies who said I would end up an old maid now whispered that I had struck gold. Little did they know that Charles, despite his good job and fine clothes, had no inheritance or important family. He was just a boy who had managed to study with great effort like me. The courtship continued for 6 months, always with my father or one of my brothers accompanying us on walks through the square or trips to the cinema that had opened in the neighboring town. Charles was respectful, never trying to cross boundaries. He brought simple gifts, a hair ribbon, a chocolate, and once even a small book of poetry that we read together on the porch of my house. "I want to marry you, Miss Josephine," he said one December night under the apple tree in our yard, with my older brother watching from a distance. "If your father allows it, I want to make you my wife." My heart nearly leapt out of my mouth. At 23, I was starting to think marriage wasn't for me, and now here I was, receiving a proposal from an educated, hard-working, and handsome man. "I need to think about it, Mr. Charles," I replied, trying to hide my emotion. But the truth is, there was nothing to think about. It was everything I could dream of. The following week, Charles came to talk to my father, bringing a bottle of good whiskey and a cigar. They talked for hours in the living room, while my mother, my sisters, and I waited anxiously in the kitchen. When the door opened, my father came in with a serious face that soon broke into a smile. "Come here, my daughter. Mr. Charles seems like a respectable man. If you want, you have my blessing." The wedding took place in March 1961 at the little chapel of Our Lady. It wasn't anything grand. We didn't have the means for that, but it was beautiful. My dress was sewn by my mother and aunts, using lace they had made themselves. Charles was elegant in a navy blue suit borrowed from the bank manager. After the ceremony, there was a small celebration in our yard with food made by the women of the family and music played by local musicians. Our house was small, but our own. Charles had rented a little 2-bedroom house near the bank, with a living room, kitchen, and even a bathroom inside, a luxury I had never had. In the first months, I lived the dream that every girl of my time nurtured. Charles was attentive, bringing me wildflowers picked on his way home from work, praising my cooking even when I overcooked the beans, and at night he was caring and respectful. I continued teaching even after getting married. Many husbands wouldn't allow it, but Charles seemed proud to have a teacher for a wife. "My woman has to show she's skilled in her mind too," he would say when someone questioned it. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. When I discovered I was pregnant 6 months after the wedding, happiness seemed complete. Charles cried when I told him, his hands trembling as he touched my still flat belly. "It's going to be a beautiful girl like you, Josie," he said with certainty, as if he could see the future. And he was right. Mary Ann was born on a hot January morning in 1962, after a difficult labor that lasted almost 20 hours. When the doctor placed her in my arms, all red and crying strongly, I felt that I had never loved anyone so much in my entire life. And looking at Charles, I saw the same overflowing love on his face. "She has your eyes, Josie," he said, using the nickname that everyone would later adopt. At that moment, I thought I had achieved perfect happiness, a loving husband, a healthy daughter, a profession I loved. What more could a woman want? Little did I know that this was just the beginning of the story, and that the man I saw as my safe harbor harbored within him a storm that would destroy everything we had built. As my mother always said, the devil wears a suit and tie and smiles in your face before showing his claws. But that's too painful a part to tell right now. I'll need time to gather my strength and continue this story in our next meeting. In the meantime, I'd like you to reflect. How many times do we judge a book by its cover? How many times is the monster that destroys us the one we swore to love until death do us part? If this story is touching your heart, please leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you think needs to hear it. Sometimes, hearing another's pain is the first step to healing our own. Part 2. The first weeks after Marianne's birth were pure joy, even with the fatigue of sleepless nights and the insecurities of being a first-time mother. Charles proved to be a dedicated father, coming home earlier from the bank to help me, changing diapers without complaint, and singing our daughter to sleep with a voice I didn't even know he had. Our nights, previously filled with conversations about the future, were now devoted to that little person who had come to complete our family. "She has your nose, Josie," he would say proudly, leaning over the crib that my carpenter brother had made for his niece. And there I was, thinking I had built paradise on earth, with a family that seemed to have come straight out of the love stories I told my students. When Marianne turned 3 months old, I returned to teaching. It was difficult to leave her, even knowing she would be in the care of my sister-in-law who lived 2 streets down from ours. But feeling the chalk between my fingers again, seeing the eager faces of the children, this was also part of who I was. Charles supported my decision, although occasionally he would let slip that when we had more children, maybe it would be better for me to stay home. I agreed without thinking much about it. In those days, a woman who worked outside the home was almost a revolution. Marianne's first year flew by like a leaf in the wind. Soon she was crawling all over the house, smiling with those 2 bottom teeth that had just come in, calling Dada to Charles, even before calling me Mama. He melted completely, buying toys we couldn't afford, making plans for when she grew up. "I'm going to put our princess in a good school, Josie. She'll be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever she wants to be." Life followed its course. Marianne grew strong and healthy, as cheerful as a little bird. I continued teaching, now at the larger school in town, having been promoted thanks to my effort and dedication. Charles was also prospering at the bank, having been appointed to a supervisory position. To everyone in Little Millfield, we were the model of the perfect family. It was around Marianne's 3rd birthday that I noticed the first changes in Charles, small, almost imperceptible to an outside observer. He no longer arrived so excited from work, complained more about the food, the household expenses, the noise Marianne made while playing. "A man works all day. He needs silence when he gets home," he would say with an irritation in his voice I had never heard before. I thought it was just fatigue. The new position came with more responsibilities, more pressure. I tried to be understanding, preparing dishes he liked, keeping Marianne quieter when he arrived, doing everything to please him, to recover that smile that had won me over at the 4th of July celebration years earlier. One night, Charles came home from work extremely irritated. There had been a problem with an important account, and he blamed one of his subordinate employees. During dinner, he wouldn't stop talking about it, using words too harsh for the man I knew. "That incompetent will answer to me. I'll make him regret being born." "Calm down, Charles." I tried to appease him, serving a little more meat on his plate. "I'm sure it was a mistake. Tomorrow you all can solve this with cool heads." I shouldn't have said anything. He hit the table with such force that the plates jumped, frightening Marianne, who began to cry. "Don't tell me what to do, woman. You think you understand anything about my work?" I was paralyzed. Never in 4 years of marriage had Charles raised his voice to me like that. The man in front of me, with his face contorted with rage, seemed like a stranger. I picked up Marianne, trying to calm her, while he got up and left, slamming the door. He returned late at night, smelling of whiskey. I pretended to be asleep when he entered the bedroom, afraid of what might happen. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened, prepared coffee for the 3 of us, played with Marianne, gave me a kiss before leaving for work. I almost convinced myself it had been an isolated episode that would never happen again. But it did repeat, more frequently than I would like to admit. The outbursts of anger came and went for increasingly trivial reasons. One week, it was because I had bought a new dress for Marianne without consulting him. The next because dinner wasn't ready when he arrived, then because he found a test paper I had brought home to grade. "You're neglecting your daughter because of these kids who aren't even yours," he yelled, tearing up the sheets where my students had made their best efforts to solve arithmetic problems. I began to walk on eggshells in my own home, watching every word, every gesture, trying to predict what might trigger the next storm. Marianne, young but sensitive, also changed. The cheerful, talkative girl now became quiet when her father was at home, as if trying to make herself invisible. The neighbors' questions began. "Ms. Josie, is everything okay? You look so worn down." Or, "Mr. Charles seems so stressed lately." I would deflect, keeping up appearances. After all, family problems are resolved within the family. That's what my mother always said. And I still loved Charles, or at least the man he had been before. In 1966, when Marianne was 5, he was promoted again, now to branch manager, a prestigious position for such a young man. There was a party at the bank, with a speech by the mayor and champagne. The first time I had ever tasted it. Charles was radiant that night, once again the charming, confident man I had fallen in love with. He introduced me to everyone as my beautiful wife the teacher Josephine, with so much pride in his voice that it made me believe everything could go back to how it was before. For a few weeks, it did. He went back to bringing small gifts, praising my cooking, playing with Marianne when he came home from work. I began to lower my guard, to allow myself to smile again without fear of provoking his wrath. It was during this time that I became pregnant for the second time. When I told Charles about the baby, he hugged me tightly, spinning me around the room just like he did when he found out about Marianne. "We're going to have a boy this time, Josie," he announced, as if he could determine that. "A son to follow in my footsteps at the bank." Those months of pregnancy were peaceful. Charles seemed to have tamed his inner demons, whatever had caused the previous outbursts. At school, I reduced my hours to better care for my health, with the blessing of the principal, who was my friend and confidant. Marianne was excited about the idea of being a big sister, already setting aside some of her toys for the baby that would arrive. Our son was born in June 1967, a strong boy with skin as dark as mine, and his father's light eyes. Charles chose the name Richard. "A powerful name for a future businessman," he said, holding his son with almost reverent care. At first, everything went well. Charles divided himself between work and home. On weekends, he would take Marianne for walks while I cared for the baby. But then, when Richard was about 4 months old, he began to get sick frequently. Nothing serious, just colds, small fevers, but enough for sleepless nights, constant crying, and accumulated fatigue for all of us. That's when Charles's behavior began to change again. The complaints returned, more intense than before. Richard's crying irritated him deeply. "I can't even think straight with this noise," he would shout, slamming the door of the room where I retreated to calm our son. Marianne, now 6, became quiet and elusive again in her father's presence. One night, after a particularly difficult day at the bank, Charles arrived late and found the house in disarray. Richard had been feverish all day. Marianne had spilled juice on the living room rug, and I was too exhausted to keep everything in order as usual. "What pigsty is this?" he yelled as soon as he stepped into the living room. "I'm out all day breaking my back to support you, and this is how you receive me?" "Charles, please," I begged, with Richard still crying with fever in my arms. "The boy is sick. I didn't have time." I couldn't finish the sentence. For the first time, he raised his hand against me. The slap hit my face with such force that I staggered backward, almost dropping the baby. Marianne, who was watching everything from the bedroom door, let out a scream I will never forget. "Daddy, no!" Charles seemed to come to his senses upon hearing his daughter's voice. He looked at his own hand as if he didn't recognize it, then at me with my face now marked by the redness of the blow, and at Richard, who was crying even harder in my arms. Without saying a word, he turned around and left again, leaving only the echo of the door slamming behind him. That night marked the definitive end of any illusion I still harbored about my marriage. The man I had married, who had promised to love and respect me, had crossed a line that could not be undone. As I put ice on my face and rocked Richard to sleep, Marianne approached and sat next to me on the bed. "Mommy, why did Daddy get so angry?" she asked in a voice so small that I could barely hear it. How do you explain to a child that sometimes people change, that something breaks inside them and lets out a darkness that even they themselves didn't know? "Daddy is very tired, honey. Sometimes adults do wrong things when they're tired." It was the only explanation I could find at that moment, though I knew it was insufficient. Marianne nodded with an understanding beyond her few years and laid her head in my lap. "It's going to be okay, Mommy. I'll take care of you and little Ricky." My heart broke a little more to hear that. A child shouldn't feel they need to protect their mother. That night, lying with my 2 sleeping children beside me, I promised myself I would find a way out for them, would find the strength to do whatever was necessary. What I didn't know at that moment, as I listened to the light rain falling outside, was that the worst was yet to come. That the real monster inhabiting Charles had not yet shown its most terrible face, and when it finally did, my life would change forever in a way I could never have imagined. Part 3. When a house begins to crumble, the first signs are almost imperceptible. A small crack in the wall that you disguise with paint. A creak in the floor that you ignore. A strange smell that you convince yourself is just your imagination. That's how my marriage began to fall apart. Silently, without fanfare, but with a constancy that I only notice now, looking back. The man I met at the 4th of July celebration, who won me over with poetry and kindness, was transforming little by little, so slowly that I almost didn't notice when that gallant smile began to give way to a closed expression, when those loving eyes became cold, when the hands that once caressed began to form fists. After Richard's birth, our second child, things quickly worsened. The boy had fragile health in his first months, cried a lot during the night, needed constant attention. I divided my time between caring for the baby, giving attention to Marianne, who was only 6 years old, and maintaining classes at school. I slept little, ate in a hurry, and even so tried to keep the house in order to not give Charles reasons to complain. But the reasons always emerged. One day it was dinner that wasn't hot enough. On another, it was Marianne's toys scattered around the living room. Then it was Richard crying too much. The complaints came accompanied by increasingly harsh looks, increasingly bitter words. "A woman who can't take care of her own house doesn't deserve to be called a wife," he would say, throwing the food plate in the sink, breaking the dishware that had been a wedding gift from my mother. I would swallow my tears, pick up the pieces, put the children to sleep, and lie down beside him in bed, keeping the greatest possible distance. I told myself it was just a difficult phase, that Charles was under pressure at work, that soon everything would return to normal. "Men have their moments," said Mrs. Connie, my older neighbor, when she saw me with eyes red from crying. "You have to be patient, child. That's just how marriage is." And I tried to be patient, prayed every blessed day, asking God for strength, asking him to bring back the Charles I had fallen in love with. But the prayers seemed to fall on deaf ears. The day he hit me for the first time marked the beginning of a new chapter in our marriage. It wasn't just the physical pain that shook me, but the terrible understanding that something fundamental had broken. The man who had sworn to love and respect me before God and the entire community had raised his hand against me, and worse, had done it in front of our daughter. "Mommy, don't cry," Marianne would say, her small hands drying my tears as I rocked Richard, trying to calm him after the scandal. "I'll take care of you." Those words, coming from such a small child, broke my heart. What kind of mother was I, needing consolation from my own daughter? What example was I setting for her about what a woman should accept from a man? In the days that followed, Charles oscillated between dramatic repentance, bringing flowers, asking for forgiveness, swearing it would never happen again, and new explosions, increasingly frequent for increasingly trivial reasons. I began to notice changes in Marianne's behavior. The cheerful, talkative girl who ran around the yard chasing butterflies now walked with her head down, spoke little, and trembled when her father raised his voice. On Sundays, when he took her for walks in the park, she would return quiet, with a distant look that didn't match a child of her age. "Don't you want to go for a walk with your father anymore, sweetie?" I asked once when she hid under the bed upon hearing Charles calling. "No, Mommy," she replied, her eyes full of a fear that alarmed me. "I don't want to be alone with him." Something in the way she said that made my heart tighten. I wanted to ask more, try to understand what was behind that fear, but Charles was already at the bedroom door, impatient. "What's this now? Are you going to start spoiling her like this? Stop the nonsense, girl. Get up from there and let's go." He pulled her by the arm with force, dragging her out while she looked at me with pleading eyes. I stayed home with Richard, uneasy with a bad feeling I couldn't name. When they returned hours later, Marianne ran straight to her room without looking me in the eyes. Charles seemed normal, even gentle, bringing a bag of candy for the two of them. That night, I sat beside Marianne's bed to tell the story she always asked for before going to sleep. She was wrapped in the blankets despite the heat, as if trying to hide from the world. "What happened on the walk today, my love?" I asked, running my hand through her hair. She remained silent for so long that I thought she had fallen asleep. Then, in a voice so low that I could barely hear, she said, "Daddy took me to a place." She paused. "He said it was our secret." "What place, honey?" "A house there at the end of Market Street. There's a man there who takes pictures." My blood froze in my veins. "Pictures? What kind of pictures?" Marianne curled up even more. "I don't know exactly. Daddy said I had to take off my dress, that it was a special job. He got angry when I cried. I couldn't sleep that night. My head was buzzing with 1,000 horrible thoughts, with the terrible suspicion of what might be happening. I wanted to confront Charles immediately, but something told me to be careful. If my suspicions were correct, confronting him directly could be dangerous for me and the children. The next day, with the excuse of buying bread, I passed by the street of the market looking for the house Marianne had mentioned. I found an improvised photography studio with a discreet sign in front. Without the courage to enter, I observed from a distance. I saw when Charles arrived, greeted the man at the door like an old acquaintance, and went in. I returned home trembling, with a bitter certainty forming in my chest. I didn't know exactly what was happening, but I knew it was something wrong, something that was hurting my daughter. In the days that followed, I became more alert, observing every interaction between Charles and Marianne. I began to notice things I had ignored before, the way he insisted on bathing her, even though she was old enough to bathe herself, how he called her to his lap frequently, even when she clearly didn't want to go, the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching. One night, I silently entered Marianne's room and found her quietly crying into her pillow. "What is it, my angel?" I asked, sitting beside her. "Mommy," she sobbed, "I don't want Daddy to come into my room at night anymore. He does things that hurt me." Those words were like a dagger in my heart. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I had just heard. Then reality hit me with full force. My husband, the father of my daughter, was abusing her. "What things, Marianne?" I asked with a knot in my throat, needing to hear to be sure, even if each word was torture. Between sobs, she told me details that no child should know, things that no child should experience. She told about the nights when he would enter her room when he thought I was sleeping, about the threats he made so she wouldn't tell anyone, about the pain and confusion she felt. I hugged my daughter tightly, letting my own tears fall freely. How could I have been so blind? How did I not notice what was happening under my own roof? Guilt consumed me, mixed with a rage I had never felt before. "Never again, my daughter," I promised, holding her face between my hands. "He will never touch you again, I promise." That same night, while Charles slept, I packed a small suitcase with some of our clothes and the few important documents we had. I planned to leave at dawn, take the children to the house of a former teacher colleague who lived in another town. But when I was finishing the preparations, I heard the sound of the bedroom door opening. Charles was standing, observing the suitcase on the bed. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "I'm leaving," I replied, trying to sound firm despite the fear consuming me. "And I'm taking my children with me." His laugh was cold, cruel. "Do you really think I'll let you take my children? That you'll survive without me? Who will give you a house, food, clothes? You are nothing without me, Josephine." "I'd rather starve on the street than stay one more day under the same roof as you," I retorted, the courage coming from I don't know where. "I know what you've been doing with Marianne. I know about the studio, the pictures. I know what you do when you think I'm not looking. You're a monster, Charles." It was like lighting a fuse. His face contorted into a mask of hatred, and before I could defend myself, I felt the impact of his fist against my face. I fell backward, stunned, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, pulling the suitcase and throwing the clothes on the floor. "And if you open your mouth to say one word about this to anyone, I swear I'll end you and those brats. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, the bank manager respected by everyone, or you, a hysterical teacher?" I remained fallen on the floor, pretending submission while he continued with his threats. Inside, however, something had broken for good. Any remnant of love or respect I might still feel for him was gone. In its place was born a fierce determination to protect my children at any cost. That night, lying beside the man I now recognized as my enemy, I made a silent vow. I would find a way to leave that house, to save my children from that man, even if it was the last thing I did in life. What I didn't know was that the opportunity would come sooner than I imagined, on an April night that would change our lives forever. Part 4. Certain nights remain marked on the soul like scars. That one, April 7, 1969, is one that not even time has managed to erase from my memory. I keep every detail, every sound, every smell, as if it had happened yesterday. not more than 50 years ago. It was a Wednesday, I remember, because it was prayer meeting night at church, and I had returned later. Charles didn't like these church visits of mine. He said it was a waste of time to be praying when I had a house to take care of. But I insisted. That hour in God's house was the only moment of the week when I felt at peace, away from the fear that had become my constant companion. Richard, almost 2 years old, had already gone to sleep early, exhausted after a whole day running around the yard. Marianne, with her 8 years, should have been sleeping too. Charles had gone out for a meeting at the bank. At least that's what he said. I arrived home around 9 and found the silence strange. Normally, he would already be back, complaining about my delay. I put my rosary in the dresser drawer, took off my shoes to not make noise, and went to check on the children. Richard's room was quiet. The boy was sleeping on his stomach, as always. But when I reached Marianne's bedroom door, I heard something that froze the blood in my veins. A muffled cry, choked, like someone trying not to make noise even in desperation, and his voice, low, threatening. "If you tell your mother, she won't believe you. And if she does believe, she'll blame you." I pushed the door in an impulse. The scene I found was worse than any nightmare I could have imagined. Marianne cowering against the wall, her face wet with tears, her eyes wide with terror. And Charles, my God, how can I say this? The man I had chosen to be the father of my children was over her with his pants open. Seeing me, his face transformed into a mask of fury. "What are you doing here? You should be at church." I didn't answer. Something primitive took over me, a strength I didn't know I had exploded from inside my chest. I ran to him and pulled him by the hair with a violence I didn't recognize in myself. He staggered backward, surprised by my reaction. I took advantage to grab Marianne in my arms and run out of the room. "You crazy woman, come back here!" he shouted while closing his pants and coming after us. "Run, my daughter. Get your brother and go to the neighbor's house, Mrs. Catherine," I whispered to Marianne, pushing her toward Richard's room. She hesitated, her eyes still full of terror. "Go, honey, please. I'll hold him back." I don't know where I found the courage. Maybe it was anger. Maybe the protective instinct that only a mother knows. When Charles tried to pass by me to reach the children, I placed myself in front of him like a wall. "Get out of my way, woman. This is none of your business." "None of my business? They're my children, you monster," I shouted, not caring if the neighbors would hear. He tried to push me aside, but I clung to him. In the weeks before, I had hidden a sewing scissors under the mattress, fearing that one day I would need to defend myself. I never thought it would come to this point, but at that moment, as we struggled in the narrow hallway, I remembered it. I managed to escape from him for an instant and ran to the bedroom. He came after me, laughing in that cruel way he had developed in recent years. "What do you think you're going to do, Josie? You think you can take me?" I grabbed the scissors from under the mattress and turned, holding them firmly. "Stay away from me and my children." He stopped at the door, surprised for a moment, then began to laugh again. "You don't have the courage. Don't test me, Charles. For God's sake, don't test me today." Something in my voice must have communicated the seriousness of the threat, because he took a step back. At the same moment, I heard the front door open and voices. Marianne had managed to get out with Richard and call for help. It was Mr. Joseph, the neighbor from the house across the street, and 2 other men I didn't immediately recognize. "What's all this shouting? Is everything okay, Mrs. Josie?" Mr. Joseph asked, cautiously entering the living room. Charles completely changed his posture, as only predators know how to do. Suddenly he was the charming, educated man everyone knew. "It's nothing, Mr. Joseph, just a couple's argument. The lady, my wife, sometimes gets nervous, you know how it is. But Marianne, my brave girl, didn't let the lie prosper. He was hurting me, Mr. Joseph. He was doing bad things to me." The silence that followed those direct, childish words was like thunder. "Mr. Joseph and the other men looked at Charles, then at me, still holding the scissors, then at the children. Something in Marianne's eyes, that genuine terror that no child could fake, must have spoken louder than 1,000 testimonies. "It's better if you come with us, Mr. Charles," said one of the men, whom I then recognized as Sheriff Davis. "We'll talk at the station." "This is absurd," Charles protested, but there was no longer the same power in his voice. It's the word of a confused child against mine. I'm the bank manager, a respected man in this town. And I'm the father of 3 girls, the sheriff replied with a coldness that gave me some comfort. We'll settle this properly. As they took Charles away, Mrs. Catherine, the neighbor to whom Marianne had run, hugged me tightly. Everything will be fine now, Josie. It's over. But I knew it wasn't over. It was just the beginning of another ordeal. In a small town in the 1960s, an accusation like that against a man of position like Charles would not be easy to sustain. Everyone knew the power men like him had, the connections, the respect they commanded simply for being men in positions of authority. At the station, I was treated as if I were the criminal. Are you sure, ma'am? You couldn't have misinterpreted the situation? Your husband is such a well-regarded man in the community. The questions came loaded with doubt, with veiled judgment. Marianne was spared a formal interrogation thanks to the intervention of Father Roman, who arrived at the station as soon as he heard about the incident. This child has been through enough trauma. If you need her testimony, let it be done with proper care and in the presence of a doctor. Charles spent only 1 night in jail. The next day, he was released after paying bail. Gossip in the town ran wild. Is it really true? Or did Ms. Josie make it up because he had another woman? That girl was always very imaginative. Maybe she confused things. A hard-working man like Mr. Charles, it can't be true. It was Mrs. Catherine who took us in during the following days. I didn't have the courage to return to my own house, fearing Charles might show up there. My children were frightened, especially Marianne, who woke up screaming every night. It's all right, my love, I would say, hugging her tightly against my chest. Mommy won't let anyone hurt you again, ever. But how to fulfill that promise? I had nowhere to go, no money saved, no family in town who could help me. My parents had already passed away, and my siblings were scattered, each with their own difficulties. It was then that I received the visit that would change the course of our story. Father Roman appeared at Mrs. Catherine's house one afternoon, accompanied by a woman in her 60s, well-dressed, with an air of serene authority that immediately inspired confidence in me. Mrs. Josie, this is Mrs. Augusta Bennett, head mistress of the Girls' Academy in Harrisburg, the priest introduced. She heard about your situation and came to offer help. Mrs. Augusta extended her hand to me, and when I took it, I felt a reassuring firmness. My dear, Father Roman told me about your case. I'm here to offer you a job as a teacher at our academy and housing for you and your children in the teachers' quarters. It's a 3-hour drive from here, far enough for you to start over. I couldn't hold back the tears. It was as if the Virgin Mary had heard my desperate prayers. But why, ma'am? You don't even know me. Mrs. Augusta smiled a sad, understanding smile. Let's just say I recognize your situation better than I would like. 20 years ago, a young teacher in circumstances similar to yours crossed my path. I couldn't help her as I should have. She took her own life a week later. I swore I would never again stand idle in the face of another woman's suffering. A week later, under the protection of Father Roman and some good men from the community, we boarded the bus to Harrisburg. I left behind the house, the furniture, almost all our belongings. It didn't matter. What mattered were Marianne and Richard sleeping peacefully on the bus seats, finally free from the terror that our home had become. As for Charles, I later learned that he was transferred from the bank to another town far away. The scandal had been hushed up, like so many others involving men of position. There was no trial, no justice in the traditional sense, but we were free of him, and that was all that mattered at that moment. In the first months in Harrisburg, Marianne barely spoke. She spent hours drawing dark, frightening scenes that broke my heart. Richard, too young to fully understand what had happened, adapted more easily to the new life. I worked hard, trying to prove my worth to Mrs. Augusta, trying to build a new home for my children. Little by little, with the support of a young female doctor who worked at the academy, Marianne began to open up, started to talk about what had happened, not just that night I witnessed, but before. I discovered with horror that the abuse had been going on for months, that my daughter had kept that terrible secret out of fear, shame, and confusion. He told me it was normal, Mommy, that all fathers did this with daughters they loved, that it was our special secret. Her words, spoken in one of the sessions with the doctor, destroyed me. How could I not have noticed? How could I have let this happen under my own roof? Guilt consumed me. I spent sleepless nights going over every sign I should have noticed, every change in Marianne's behavior that I ignored, attributing to the stress at home or normal changes in childhood. The doctor, Dr. Claire, helped me understand that the guilt wasn't mine. Men like Charles are specialists in hiding their crimes, Mrs. Josie. They manipulate, threaten, create an environment of fear where silence seems the only safe option. You did what you could, and most importantly, when you found out, you acted. Many women, out of fear or dependency, choose to see, but not act. You saved your daughter. They were words of consolation, but the scar from that night, from that discovery, never completely disappeared. I carry it with me to this day, more than 5 decades later, not as an open wound, not anymore, but as a reminder of the price we pay for blind trust, for chosen ignorance, for the belief that we truly know those we love. As I write these lines, I think of how many women are at this very moment living in similar situations, how many children are suffering in silence, believing that what happens to them is normal, or worse, that somehow it's their fault. It's for these women, for these children, that I finally decided to tell my story. Because sometimes all we need to find the courage to change our lives is to know that we are not alone, that others have passed through the same dark valley and managed to come out the other side, not unscathed, not without scars, but alive and eventually healed. Part 5, our arrival in Harrisburg was like being reborn. The Girls' Academy, directed by Mrs. Augusta, was a place of order and peace, with its well-kept gardens and quiet corridors. My children and I received a small apartment in the teachers' quarters, 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and bathroom. It seemed like a palace after what we had been through. The first months were of adaptation and healing. Marianne began treatment with Dr. Claire, who, with patience and delicacy, helped my daughter process the trauma she had lived through. Richard, at just 2 years old, adapted easily to the new life, charming everyone with his smile and energy. As for me, I immersed myself in work, teaching English and literature to elementary school girls, finding in the routine of the classroom a refuge for my tormented mind. It was in 1971, almost 2 years after our arrival, that I noticed a profound change in Marianne. One Sunday afternoon, we were sitting on the small porch of our apartment. She, now 10 years old, was drawing in her notebook as she usually did. But something was different. The dark and frightening drawings had given way to colorful scenes. Flowers, butterflies, a house with open windows. "How beautiful, sweetie," I commented, feeling hope sprout within my chest. "What is it that you're drawing?" She raised her eyes to me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a sparkle that reminded me of the girl she had been before everything happened. "It's our house, Mommy, the one we're going to have someday." At that moment, I knew we were on the right path, that the worst part was perhaps behind us. It didn't mean the scars had disappeared. They never would completely. But we were learning to live with them, to move forward despite them. Time passed, filled with work, my children's studies, the small daily joys that I had barely noticed before and that now seemed precious. Richard entered school, revealing himself to be an intelligent and curious boy. Marianne, though she still had difficult days, began to make friends among the academy students, to participate in activities, to smile more. In 1975, I received a letter that shook our newly conquered tranquility. It was from my older sister, who still lived in Millfield. Charles had returned to town and was looking for us. "He's been drinking a lot and keeps saying he's going to get his children back, that you had no right to take them," my sister wrote, concerned. "Be careful, Josie." Fear returned, cold and familiar, settling in my stomach. I immediately sought out Mrs. Augusta, who, after reading the letter, held my trembling hands in hers. "Don't be afraid, Josephine. He can't reach you here. You have the protection of the academy, the church, and now also my personal protection." She was right. Charles never reached Harrisburg. I later learned that he was arrested for assaulting a bank employee in a fit of rage and ended up dying in jail shortly after, a victim of liver cirrhosis. I felt no joy at the news, nor vengeance, not even relief. What I felt was a strange sense of closure, of a chapter ending, as if I could finally turn the page definitively. In 1977, 10 years after Richard's birth and 8 years since our escape, I received a proposal that would change our path again. The academy was expanding, and Mrs. Augusta invited me to take over the direction of the new elementary wing. It was a recognition of my work, of the dedication I had shown all those years. "You have a gift for leadership, Mrs. Josie," she told me, "and more importantly, you have compassion. It's exactly what we need to shape these girls." I accepted the challenge with a mixture of enthusiasm and apprehension. I had never occupied a position of such responsibility, but I discovered that Mrs. Augusta was right. I had something to offer, a wisdom born of pain, a strength I didn't know I had. Under my direction, the elementary wing flourished. We implemented more modern teaching methods, bringing art and music into the curriculum, encouraging the girls to think for themselves, to question, to dream beyond the limits society tried to impose on them. "An educated girl is a free woman" became the unofficial motto of our wing. It was what I deeply believed, what I wished I had learned earlier in life. Marianne grew up observing my work, absorbing those lessons. At 17, she surprised me by announcing she wanted to study law. "I want to help women like us, Mommy," she said with a determination in her eyes that filled me with pride. "I want them to know they have choices, that they have rights." In 1980, when Marianne was accepted to the law school at Penn State, I cried with joy and gratitude. My daughter, who had faced the worst kind of trauma, was transforming her pain into purpose. Richard, now 13, was already talking about becoming a doctor to take care of people like Dr. Claire took care of us, he would say. The 1980s brought changes for both America and our family. The country was experiencing the Reagan era. Women were beginning to occupy spaces previously denied to them. And I, at 46, met Sebastian. He was a history professor, a widower, with a gentleness and integrity that initially frightened me. After Charles, I had built high walls around my heart. I didn't believe I could trust a man again, much less love one. Sebastian didn't pressure, didn't demand, didn't rush. With the patience of someone who knows the value of time, he won my trust little by little. It took almost 3 years before I accepted his proposal. "I'm not offering perfection, Josie," he said when he gave me a simple engagement ring. "Just an honest love and the commitment to always respect who you are." We got married in 1985 in a simple ceremony in the Academy's chapel. Marianne, already graduated and working as a lawyer, and Richard, then a medical student, were our best man and maid of honor. Mrs. Augusta, now elderly but still lucid, gave us her special blessing. With Sebastian, I learned that not all men are monsters, that it is possible to build a relationship based on mutual respect, understanding, and companionship. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the past returned like a wave, catching me off guard, and I would close up, retreat to my safe place. He never complained, never grew impatient. "Everyone carries their scars, Josie," he would say. "I'm here for the good hours and the bad hours, for the sunny days and for the storms." We had almost 20 years together before cancer took him in 2004. They were years of learning, of growth, of a quiet happiness I never thought was possible. His death left a void, but not an abyss. Unlike losing Charles, which had been like escaping from a prison, losing Sebastian was like saying goodbye to a good travel companion with gratitude for the shared miles. Today, at 85, I look back and see a life marked by extremes, a pain so deep that it almost destroyed me, and a joy so pure that it redeemed everything. I see my children, now adults with their own children. Marianne, a respected lawyer specializing in women's and children's rights. Richard, a dedicated pediatrician with the same gentle smile from childhood. I see my grandchildren growing up in homes where respect is the rule, not the exception, where they know they are unconditionally loved, that they are safe, that they have a voice. This, perhaps, is my greatest victory. Having broken the cycle of violence, having created a new story for our family. If there's a lesson I've learned in these 85 years, it's that suffering doesn't have to be the end point, that even from the darkest ashes, something beautiful and strong can be born, that our story is not defined by others, no matter how powerful they may seem, but by the choices we make in the face of adversity. To you who are watching and perhaps going through your own valley of shadows, I want to say, you are not alone. There is a way out. There is a tomorrow. Healing may seem impossible now, when the pain is so present, so acute. But believe me when I say it is possible to rebuild, it is possible to heal, it is possible to find joy again. If this story touched your heart, please leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you think needs to hear these words.